I want you to listen to the next few minutes. Paul Kangor, who's going to be on the program later, has written a new book called The Communist, and it is about the mentor of Barack Obama. And it is, if you want to understand Barack Obama, there are two books. The Rage of Barack Obama by Dinesh D'Souza, and he's now made this into a movie. It's coming out soon, called 2016. And it explains who he is as an anti-colonialist, his despising America as a colonial power. You'll understand it. And so much will make sense. Paul Kangor started doing research a couple of years ago on Frank Marshall Davis. And he thought, whatever. Now, he's written a book on Hillary Clinton, on Ronald Reagan, on their mentors. He's a wildly respected guy. And he says, you can't understand a man if you don't know his mentor. His mentor is Frank Marshall Davis. And I'm going to show you what Frank Marshall Davis believes. And this is all spelled out in his book. This is a guy who had a huge, thick FBI file. Very, very bad man. Card-carrying communist. I'm going to give you the list one by one of things that Frank Marshall Davis believed. And then couple it with what we've seen the president say or do. For instance, Frank Marshall Davis, and this is all outlined in the book, Frank Marshall Davis rejected and blasted Winston Churchill. Hated him, colonialist. What is one of the first things that Barack Obama did when he got into the Oval Office? He boxed up the bust of Winston Churchill and sent it back to England. Huge slap in the face. Understand his mentor. Frank Marshall Davis advocated a lot in paper, article after article after article in the newspapers about wealth redistribution. Here's Obama.
I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody.
Frank Marshall Davis favored taxpayer funding of universal health care. President Obama.
I happen to be a proponent of a single-payer universal health care plan. And that's what Jim's talking about when he says everybody in, nobody out. A single-payer health care plan, universal health care plan.
Obama's mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, supported government stimulus and trumpeted the public sector over the private sector. Obama.
Only government can provide the short-term boost necessary to lift us from a recession this deep and severe. Only government.
Davis constantly excoriated the rich, railed against big business, bankers, big oil, corporate fat cats, quoting millionaires, rich men, excess profits. But surely those were just the words of his mentor. Here's Barack Obama on big oil.
Right now, the biggest oil companies are raking in record profits. Profits that go up every time folks pull up into a gas station. But on top of these record profits, oil companies are also getting billions a year in taxpayer subsidies.
Obama on fat cat bankers.
I did not run for office to be helping out a bunch of fat cat bankers on Wall Street.
Obama on millionaires and billionaires.
Either we ask the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share in taxes, or we're going to have to ask seniors to pay more for Medicare. There's nothing serious about a plan that claims to reduce the deficit by spending $1 trillion on tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires.
Frank Marshall Davis, a card-carrying communist and the mentor of Barack Obama. Here's Barack Obama saying exactly the same things as Frank Marshall Davis on excess profits.
I mean, I do think at a certain point you've made enough money.
The president's mentor, Frank, also often talked about the rich not paying their fair share. Now, this is a guy who, we don't have the sound bites, but we have all of the articles written in the newspapers where he's saying these things. And it's all lined out in this book called The Communist. Frank Marshall Davis talked about the rich not paying their fair share, that corporations and wealthy get breaks and others don't. Have you heard that before?
The truth is, you can't solve our deficit without cutting spending. But you also can't solve it without asking the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share. or without taking on loopholes that give special interests in big corporations tax breaks that middle-class Americans don't get.
Let me play this super classic from the president on God and Guns.
It's not surprising then that they get better. They claim to guns or religion or antipathy towards people who aren't like them. Or...
Got it? God and guns. So their religion. Frank Marshall Davis warned over and over again against God and gun-clinging Americans who were just listening to huckster preachers. He's saying these things almost exactly the same way. Here's Obama on women and the church.
Under the rule, women will still have access to free preventive care. That includes contraceptive services, no matter where they work.
Davis used to write about the Catholic Church and how it was an obstacle for his vision of a giant state and had to be taken down and cut in size. He was relentless. There's more. We'll give it to you, and you can pick up the book right now by Paul Kangor. It's called The Communist. If you really want to go deep now, if you really want to know who this guy is, if you want to understand why he can get up and say, you know what, Henry Ford never did it himself, read The Communist, available in bookstores everywhere.